just want somebody who have choices of other pharmacists, but he prefers to come back to me.
Welcome to our Digital Pharma Podcast. My name is Dr. Elena Vatutina, and I'm CEO and founder of Pharma Global Company, the innovation-driven company which introduces the latest technologies into healthcare industry. Today, the guest of ours is Dr. Nadir Kheir, the professor from Ajman University. Being a pharmacist from the background, he will share his point of view about the ethical aspects of marketing and promoting in pharma. Dr. Nadir, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure of mine to host you here in this studio for our Digital Pharma new format of podcast with healthcare professionals, healthcare experts, where we are about to provide the latest knowledges and the greatest experience, greatest skills when it goes about healthcare industry. And it's a great pleasure of mine to host you over here because you can share the experience not about the GCC market and the MENA market, but also about the other markets experience with our audience, which is about to be from everywhere, from Russia and CIS countries, from MENA region, and from all over the world. So thank you for being with us.
The pleasure is all mine, Elena. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really quite excited to be in this program and this interview as well.
To start with, tell us briefly about yourself. How you came into the healthcare industry and why are you here in Dubai?
Right, it's a long story, but I'm going to try to summarize it. I am a pharmacist by profession, and I worked in a couple of countries before I came to the United Arab Emirates. I actually started right after my graduation to work in the Sultanate of Oman, and I was a hospital pharmacist for many years there. I was at my last post, which was my longest post, was in the Royal Hospital of Oman. I was the superintendent of pharmacy services there. I was very happy with what we have done in Oman in terms of the profession as well. We moved from Oman to New Zealand, where I was pursuing postgraduate degrees after a while working. And I joined Otago University in the southern island of New Zealand, where I did a postgraduate diploma, then started a master's, then what was opened into a PhD opportunity, which I did. And I worked in the, at that time, new college, School of Pharmacy in Auckland, where my residence is there with my family. So I moved back to the Gulf in Qatar. So I stayed in Qatar, and we worked at the, I was one of the founding members of the new College of Pharmacy in Qatar University. That was one of the, I think, very interesting and exciting opportunities to be part of a very first team to initiate a College of Pharmacy in that country. And I think it went really well there. I went back to New Zealand 2017 to the School of Pharmacy again. I was the director of a postgraduate program for about 2 years. Then I came back to the United Arab Emirates this time. So okay. It's a cycle sort of a thing.
It's such a great journey, like
a
huge distance journey, I would say.
Exactly, it's a big circle. So we started here, we came to New Zealand, then came back. I came back to Ajman. This is my first actual time to work in the United Arab Emirates in Ajman University as well.
Mm-hmm. But when you were a child, did you dream of being a pharmacist?
I must say, not exactly. I wasn't dreaming to be a pharmacist. Maybe later on, where the options were all in science, but maybe medicine and pharmacy in those aspects. But my real calling inside, which I discovered it later on, was aspect of healthcare profession that involves more social aspects, and aspects of how would a healthcare provider be effective in terms of the healthcare they provide, not only through medicines, but also through changing behaviors, probably through interpersonal skills, through communication. This is exactly what I teach, communication skills and aspects which are those sort of skills rather than drug products. But I mean, they all come together to give us a graduate who have the knowledge, which is the medicines and how they do, how they work, and how to also educate others and how to help people, for example, care about their health and take their medicines as prescribed and so on and so forth. So I bring the skills with the knowledge so as it has to be one package. So that's the area which I found my calling is in, so social aspects of health.
And what do you think, the pharmacists nowadays, this is more about social job or this is more about business?
There is very important aspect, and by all means, I mean, when you look at doctors, for example, they do help patients and they do generate income, and that's very important cycle of life. I think pharmacists, they have to also be aware of and that they will have to generate income for their continuity in their profession. So yes, there is a business part in pharmacy, definitely. Specifically pharmacy, because pharmacists could choose to become not only hospital pharmacists, which is a public hospital, for example, but they can own their own businesses. They could be having community pharmacies where they look after patients' needs, but at the same time, they're paid for that. They're paid not in a salary, but in a business sort of a formula. So, and they make profit, and that profit actually goes back to improve what they do. So it's so business is part of pharmacy. The other pharmacists join pharmaceutical industry, for example, and companies. And so the business part and generating income and profit is part of what they do, so as to sustain what they do.
When it goes about community pharmacies, this is, there are so many discussions if this is a social sort of business or this is like a pure business. When it goes about your point of view, what do you think? So I'm a pharmacist. Let's imagine I'm a pharmacist and you're a patient. And you're coming to me and you do not have the prescription, you just ask for the advice. So what should I advise to you? The cheapest medication or the most expensive one? The cheapest, maybe this is the best for you, and the most expensive one, maybe this is the best for the business. So where is this line, where is this border between business and social aspect of pharmacy?
This is a very tricky but very important question. It's a very good question because they do interact, don't they? I mean first, the pharmacists are always described as the most accessible healthcare providers. That means you don't need usually to make an appointment to see a pharmacist. If it's difficult for a patient to make an appointment with a doctor, to queue up, to wait for a week, there is a pharmacist there or a pharmacy. They can walk in and they can be served. So the trust between the community and the pharmacist is very important. That trust, so they become, they become like customers, their clients, and they go there because they receive a care that they need. So it's important when pharmacists, for example, look at generating an income, which is permissible and it's actually required. They don't look in a short term, but the long term. And the long term means a relationship built on trust. That means if there is a cheaper medicine which does the same, like a generic medicine, which does the same effect with the same set of side effects, and it's cheaper, probably a good pharmacist who looks for a long-term relationship would give the patient the choice of the medications they have and also the prices they have. And they could actually explain that they do the same. However, some patients might prefer to go to the brand because it looks better and it is made in a country which is industrialized and they don't want a local brand and so on. So it's up to them, that will build that trust. Now, having said that, not all pharmacists and people probably give that freedom, and they might go to the more expensive to make money. But it has repercussions in terms of their relationships. It depends on the personality of the pharmacist. It depends on their respect of patients' autonomy and freedom to choose. and also in their empathy with patients. They might, patients are different, their socioeconomic backgrounds, their abilities are different, their with the affordability to medicines are different. So you have to take this in consideration. We can read that within our discussions with patients. It's important to give them the choice.
And when it goes about the role of a healthcare retail specialist, I'm not just saying about pharmacist or a doctor, but generally healthcare professional and their engagement with the patient. You have an experience over here in UAE, and you saw so many cases across the GCC region in Oman and in Qatar. And in comparison with New Zealand, what's different? Or it's equal, it's the same?
I would say if we take New Zealand as a country that has very developed healthcare, I'm not saying compared to the UAE and Qatar, they have really very well developed healthcare systems as well and services. But probably there are differences in regulations. For example, you find obvious differences in the classifications of medications into over-the-counter. And for example, in New Zealand, you find in the community pharmacy, there are medicines that could be sold over the counter. Now, they are known to be very safe generally, and they could be sold safely without a prescription. But most of the medicines, the rest of the medicines, are all prescription medicines, especially for long-term health conditions. And some of the medicines are in a gray area between prescription and non-prescription. This should be only sold by a pharmacist, not a shop assistant, not a pharmacy technician. And this requires a little bit more instructions or advice and so on. This very detailed sort of categorization lacks in a lot of other countries, where most of the medicines elsewhere, they could be sold without a prescription, except maybe antibiotics and medications working in the central nervous system, medications that can cause addiction. And that actually puts much more responsibility, professional responsibility, on the pharmacists working in these areas, in the Middle East, for example, because medicines are freely available without a prescription, which means the pharmacist must be much more vigilant in giving the right advice, in asking the right questions, in making referrals, in advising the patient to make an appointment right now and see a doctor, because so it makes the responsibility of a pharmacist here much more elsewhere, because prescription medicines that are prescriptions only elsewhere are freely available here. That means I should be much more careful.
But do you think pharmacists over here have enough of knowledges and soft skills to ask the proper questions of their patient to prescribe those sorts of medication?
It really, Elena, depends on the background, the training, where the pharmacists have graduated from, the curriculum content itself, whether they teach those aspects, the soft skills, important skills in communication, in the concept of care, and so on. It really depends on where the pharmacist comes from. Unfortunately, I'm not talking about locally here, but what I have seen in most of the developing countries, these aspects of skills lack a little bit, and regulations have got a place here, where, what is required of the pharmacist to do or what to say should be things which are mandatory, which are requirement. So it's much more than dispensing a medicine. It's actually the service with the drug. The drug should not be a commodity that is sold because of a price. It should be a product that can impact and will impact in people's health. So what should I add to the product in terms of what questions should I ask? What advice should I give? What interest to follow up should I do? And these are some of the skills that are taught in most contemporary new curricula as undergraduate courses. The good news is I have worked in Qatar, I'm now working in the United Arab Emirates, and this is where I know. the curricula are changing to a modern curricula. They now have those, most of the colleges of pharmacy, they have got those skills taught from day one in colleges of pharmacy. So the emphasis is not only in hard knowledge, foundational sciences, but also in skills. So professional skills courses, communication courses, and so on. And this will equip the pharmacist with those skills. When the pharmacists don't do them, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they don't know how to do it. So it is important that the curricula, the content in pharmacy colleges change to become modern, and that is exactly what's happening in most of the universities and colleges of pharmacy around. So,
but this side of, this is the educational part of the question, and there is also the social and the ethic aspects of this question as well. And the aspect of the health or the society in general.
Yes.
So what is your attitude and what do you think of all those self-treatment?
Yeah.
Isn't it dangerous for the society, this uncontrolled usage of antibacterial medications?
Yes, definitely. This is a very good point, because self-treatment, people walk in with symptoms. I have that, I have fever, I have cough, I have sore throat. Without a prescription, not seeing a doctor, he's just, somebody walks in. That immediately places a responsibility in the professional, in the pharmacist, for example. So walking in patients require the pharmacist to do something much more than dispensing a prescription. It requires the pharmacist to ask the right questions to come to a diagnosis. Actually, the pharmacist in these aspects will be prescribing. The minute they say, oh, that's what you need, the pharmacists have prescribed. It doesn't have to be a prescription written by hand. It could be a recommendation based on information. So that is very important thing. Actually, we can say pharmacists prescribe most of the time for minor diseases. And that is the ethical part here. Because if I cannot prescribe, because I don't know what to ask for and what to do, then there is a problem, isn't it? So that's exactly, and that is, I think the asset of your question is that's why it's a very important question, because people do go to a pharmacist at their point, the first point of contact, and when somebody walks in a pharmacy, they are saying something, and I always say this to my students: the minute somebody walks in a pharmacy, they are saying, without saying it, I trust you to take care of me. I trust you because I'm professional. So we need to have pharmacists who would know what to do and how to listen and what questions to ask and what to do with the information given to them and to recommend the right thing. Sometimes they may sometimes not sell. Don't take money. What you need is to see a doctor, because you need to be seen immediately. So that means I chose not to sell a product and take money. I chose to do the right thing, is to refer the patient back to be seen and be examined in a clinic room or in lab and so on, and something else would be prescribed. So it's very important here. The ethical part you've mentioned is very important, because sometimes I do go to the option of not selling a product because the patient needs something further.
But at the same time, what you have just said, this means that the ethical level and the mental level of pharmacists should be really high.
Very.
To make this choice.
Very.
And this extremely depends on the human's personality.
Exactly.
And you are, as a person who is working with students, do you understand how it's difficult to develop those sorts of professionals at this level of ethics, of mental health, that they would choose to help a person not to get money?
Exactly. Exactly. It is very demanding from a professional aspect when you do that. And your question is we do not expect people to be born with that, to be naturally born with that standard of ethics. That's why ethics are taught as a course in pharmacy curricula, and of course in other healthcare providers, healthcare colleges. Because ethics is, some of it is not an inborn skill. Sometimes you got to know what is the meaning of, respecting confidentiality. Why is it important? The meaning of being faithful to your patient. The meaning of care. What's the meaning of caring for somebody? The importance of follow-up, because you'll be interested and curious health-wise, positively, about knowing somebody is improving or not. These aspects must be part of what we include in our education, because we cannot just expect people to be born with them. So it is very tempting to sell a product and have the money, unless there is a barrier telling you, no, 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 no. Ask more questions. There is a problem there. There is a red flag. There is a warning sign. This patient has to be seen, and this medicine might not be the one they wanted. So,
but should we rely on the human in this aspect, or we should probably, like, it's much more honest towards patient, to put it inside of a certain system, maybe automatic system? Because when it goes about the ethical level of this, on the one side, this is the responsibility of the pharmacist.
yes.
And on the other hand, can you imagine the pressure which a single pharmacist is facing? So he's facing the pressure of a business issues.
Yes.
Because it's not a secret, if it goes about pharmacy, this is also a business and it should be profitable, and the pressure goes from the manager of a pharmacy that they need to follow this and that KPIs, number of positions in the check, number of the average bill, and etc. This is the first sort of pressure. The second sort of pressure goes from pharmaceutical companies, because this is, even though this is the companies who create the medication that help people to survive, but this is also a business, because they need to follow the revenue streams, they need to invest in R&D and etc. And that's how their field force managers are working. Isn't that pressure is super huge for a human being?
Yes. Yes, you brought an important aspect, which is for example, pharmaceutical companies. I think I will address that as well. But let's go back to the pressure on the individual pharmacist, for example, because here there is a temptation and there is the need to make revenue and to make profit and to sell, because that means their salary will be paid and their longevity in the job as well. And here we require something which might, as you mentioned, maybe too much to expect, but it is the right thing to do, because an ethical pharmacist who sometimes, that should be a part of the training of the new employee by the owner, for example. Sometimes you might go for the choice of no drug, but a referral. What will happen? I will lose that 100 dirhams or $50, but what do I gain? A trust, a client for life. This person who has actually come through that situation where a pharmacist tells him to go back and see a doctor will probably tell other people, and they tell them about
how you can feed your kids with the trust from the side of your patient.
The trust is money. The patient will come back. I have just warned somebody who have choices of other pharmacies, but he prefers to come back to me to buy his skincare over the counter. I have gained the trust and the faithfulness of a client for a longer period. So is it better to gain $50 or to have a client for life or for a year? Not only that, this patient will tell others about how honest that pharmacist was. He actually referred me, and when I did go, I found there was something really wrong with me, and he actually almost saved my life. So what will happen? Other people will also come. So what I have done is I sacrificed a bit of money because of the long-term benefits that I'm getting by having faithful people coming to me because they trust me, because I am trustworthy. So that is the difference between a short-term, narrow look for a quick buck and a lateral, longer look at, what the consequences would be. So I have gained people, not only a person, maybe people or families to come to my pharmacy because I am, I'm somebody who can tell them the truth, somebody who they trust, and that's important.
Because I was wondering, so what I can see within the last 20 years, so in different places on Earth, the market is changing. So we can see the implementation of digital technologies into that. We can see the implementation of online pharmacies. And when you can order something online, the role of pharmacists as a human and this ethical part of this particular human is decreasing.
Yes.
And over here we can see the competition between words of mouth and digital instrument.
Yeah.
So where is the balance?
Yes, I think that is ultimately where the future will be going, and I think the COVID-19 has sort of expedited or brought that a little bit quicker, which is the technology and the robotics and the telepharmacy and intercepting or getting probably rid of the middleman or the middle person, where people will probably, a lot of the functions done now by humans would be later on, automated. So automation is a big thing, and automation means less need for people and staff, and more relying on machines. So that is coming to different extents. And there is a downside and there is an upper side or a better side. The downside, of course, you mentioned the loss of that human interaction, the loss of the feeling of empathy between the health provider and the person, and probably loss of opportunities of work, and people will be laid out of work and so on. That's definitely some of the disadvantages and the risks coming with automation to an degree. But automation also brings accuracy, so we will avoid a lot of human errors, and that is a fact, observed and published in research. So will probably almost zero errors because of, there is no human involved in dispensing or counting or labeling. These are all automated. So we have now saved a lot of problems due to errors in dispensing, for example. That's a good one. But the other thing is this limitation or this risk will bring opportunities, because when pharmacists are, have no place in that mechanical dispensing process, they will be looking at other roles, which are much more patient-related roles. For example, I give you an example. So when pharmacy moved from focusing on the product in preparing and labeling and dispensing, they become much more patient-centered. So they move to sit, talk, and collect information from people, from persons, from patients, especially people who are in many drugs, polypharmacy, people who have on long-term medications. They require much more than just dispensing the drug. They require continuous interaction with a healthcare provider like a pharmacist. So the pharmacist moved from dispensing only to much more closer to the patient, to talk, to analyze the information, and to develop care plan. This is a huge move in pharmacy starting in the 1990s.
And where are we going right now? So we can see that impact of new technologies into the market. So where we will be in 10 years?
They will be, I think automation will be much more prevalent. I will see probably an integration. There will be some balance between human contact and functions that could be done by machines better. I think that is the balance we want. There will be still the need. There will not be fully automated robotic world. That is something like the Terminator movie. That would be something which nobody wants to go there. I think where we're going at is any function that could be done more efficiently by automation and robotics should go there. This will be more prevalent in a lot of countries in the world. Those functions which require the intervention of a human being, a pharmacist or a healthcare provider, who needs to use their human skills, would remain. And that will be the way to go on, that balance. I don't see a frightening sort of disconnect where the human factor would totally disappear. People will be speaking to machines. I think there will be still a need for a person-to-person contact, but where it is important, where it is the benefits of it is much more than anything else. That is where the future is going, I think.
You know, I will speak about my story a little bit. When I was a child, of course, we always ask our parents where to go, which profession to choose. And my parents were focusing me on being an accountant. And my mom, she believed that accountant is a person who will always be with a job. And this happened so many years ago. And within all these years, what we can see that all these regular operations that was done manually by accountants are reducing dramatically. And right now, only head accountant and financial guys who are at super top level, they are really, really needed on the market. And all other people who are doing this paper job, it can be done by machines, it can be done by Zoho or other applications. And so means these people who have chosen this profession many years ago, right now they are not as competitive on the market as they could be if they were 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Don't you think that the same thing is about to happen with pharmacists as a profession? So it means the society of pharmacists will be distinguished into two categories. One is who are super advanced ones, super consultative ones, and maybe somehow they can compete with the GP doctors when it goes about consulting the patient. And others who were focused just on technical side of their job, and they will be out of market within, I do not know, 10, 20 years. What do you think of this scenario?
This is a real risk, and this is the natural things of progression of societies. Change is inevitable. I mean, the only thing that it does not change is change itself. So change is part of life, but we always have a way to kind of suit the change. I can tell you what happened in pharmacy, the history of pharmacy, where have we been and where we are now. And that brings the aspect of pharmaceutical industry, by the way, to the picture. Because some of the pharmacy thinkers and philosophers and who brought a great deal of concepts in pharmacy have divided the road in pharmacy, the times and of the professional pharmacy into a traditional phase, transitional phase, and patient-centered phase. The traditional phase, and I just tell you how that when things change, pharmacists have to change. Where pharmacists used to make medicines in their pharmacies, so they use lotions, they make lotions and syrups and skin products in the pharmacy, and that generating income to them. And that was pharmacy at that time. So it's product, but also making products.
I still remember all those pharmacies in my
you
hometown.
Can find, I mean, yeah, you can see them. You can see them even in pictures now, with the pestles and the mortar and the crushed tablets. And this was their job with the pharmacists, which are accepted and practiced full time. What happened? What happened after that, during that phase, is the pharmaceutical industry emerged, where there is scientific methods of making drugs to the highest level of accuracy based on science, the occurrence of drug companies. So suddenly the pharmacist lost that opportunity. Medications are made better, they look better, they function better, they're more accurate. So they went into desperation. That led to the evolution of clinical pharmacy. So they moved immediately from that because they lost their jobs. So they went, and here comes to the transitional stage, which is clinical pharmacy, where pharmacists had to move. Their curricula in the universities had to change. And they became drug experts, drug information experts. They work with doctors in the rounds in the hospitals. So they have went from traditional, because they were forced to move, to become clinical pharmacists. What happened there? Clinical pharmacy became experts in medication. They became experts in medicines. What is missing? The patient. They focus very much on the products. Comes the other evolution, where pharmacists they had to find another role, another mission, because they started to become really too focused in the product. And comes the movement, which is very big in pharmacy, which is pharmaceutical care, which is a patient-centered practice, which says, hey, it's not only the product. Somebody is taking the product. Look at the person, know how to communicate, know how to care, know how to follow up, know how to write a care plan. So pharmacists move from the transitional into the patient care. So what I'm saying is, when the conditions become, it becomes like very challenging like those, every profession have to move in a better, a place where they find other innovations they can bring in, they use their talents, they change to suit the times, so they never, I don't think they will see in the future, pharmacy becomes redundant. No, they become different. And that's because they have to move, they have to evolve. So pharmacy is always in a stage of evolving, always evolving with the times. So that is what I perceive to happen in the future. When we lose the need for technical only, pharmacists will always move in the ladder to go in parallel with the change in the society and the requirements and life, and they'll always be needed.
Let's imagine I'm a teenager who is about to enter the university, one of the medical universities, and I'm thinking of going to the pharmacist faculty. What would you advise to me, which segment to choose, where to go, and why?
In pharmacy?
I do not know. Like, I'm a teenager. What advice you would give to me?
Well, that's a real situation. Sometimes you are put in that situation. I would probably look first at your talents and I will probably, the first thing I'll try is to explore what you think your strengths are, your real passion. Because nobody knows anybody rather than the person themselves. They might need somebody to think with them. But I probably will put the ball in your court, but with a little bit of help. Maybe just try to kind of organize your thoughts, maybe help you reflect in yourself, maybe try to explore what you think about the world around you, what would you find yourself doing, where is your talent, where is your passion, where is something is too boring for you and mechanical, maybe you don't want that. So it comes back to the person with a little bit of help. Because dictating something on anybody will not work. It always have to be a conviction within the person, but you have to take their hand and try to make them think.
But I'm saying I want to work in a pharmacy, so
in a pharmacy,
would you say to me, like, no, it's not a good idea, it's better to focus on pharmaceutical marketing? Or you would say, yeah, let's go, try to do your best, and maybe within some time you will open your own community pharmacy.
Yes.
So what would you say to me?
I would say probably, maybe I am going to be biased, because in pharmacy itself, even in what we do in education, there are certain people who are pharmacy scientists, like pharmaceutical science. They are the people whose research are in development of medicines and discovery of its characteristics. So they're very science-oriented. There are others who are in pharmacoeconomics, which is in economy of pharmacy and purchasing and so on. There are others who are in pharmacy practice, like the things I've been talking about now. There are others in social pharmacy, which is aspects of pharmacy and people, So in pharmacy, in itself, there are different categorization and specialties. I am definitely biased too, not biased, but I know more about my area. But what I would do or say to the person, like in your stage, or hypothetically, I would probably explain what pharmacy is about, what specialties are within pharmacy, and what they do. saying, for example, you can be a pharmaceutical scientist. These are the people who explore new medications, their characteristics, and they might end up working in pharmaceutical companies within research teams, and maybe they work as researchers in universities to publish and so on. There are others who are pharmacy practice. They look at development and improving of the pharmacy role, the pharmacist's role with the community. They also help pharmacists study how to communicate well and effectively. So you have to have those aspects of skills as well. And there are others who might want to go to pharmaceutical industry to detail or to market pharmaceutical products. So they have to be really convincing. They look good, and they have a lot of knowledge, and they can answer questions, and they want always to increase the profit of the company and so on. You might want to
more commercial oriented.
Exactly, or commercial oriented, and also doing that will help also the community, by the way, of course, because you will be selling medicines that are required, but you have to talk about them to the prescribers. Now, what you do there is something different, but I mean, it's an option. So I think for somebody who might be interested in pharmacy, they have to know what is in pharmacy. What are the different aspects of it? What studying pharmacy means, the requirement of it. It's a lot of work, by the way. A lot of assessments, a lot of examinations, a lot of hands-on lab work and so on. But at the end of the day, you will have the freedom to choose where to go. You might wish to continue doing your postgraduate to specialize in one of the areas I just described, pharmaceutical sciences or pharmacy practice or social pharmacy and so on. So that means a master's or even a PhD, coming back to academia, being a researcher, or going to a company, or working in a hospital as a clinical pharmacist, seeing patients every day, and communicating with your colleagues, other healthcare providers, being colleagues with doctors and nurses and others, talking about cases, helping a patient as a team. So these are all options as a pharmacist. So pharmacy carries a lot of opportunities, very diverse, but I think very exciting as well, very interesting.
When it goes R&D, so what I can see nowadays, this is what it goes about the market, all the circumstances on the market, all the involvements of new technologies, and the side of competition which is going inside the pharmaceutical manufacturers and pharmaceutical companies, so that generics are super rapidly growth segments, and so just to increase the margin is the only one way to invest into R&D. So this creates the circumstances for R&D segment to grow up. But do you think the current students who are at your university, whom you're facing every single day, what do you think, are they familiar with this startup industry in R&D, in biotech?
Not necessarily. I don't think the students who are undergraduates are well equipped with this level of knowledge. What we give them are, since they're very initial or first years of pharmacy, is a bit of everything. So we tell them about pharmacy as a profession, okay, the progression of pharmacy. We tell them about the healthcare in countries, what this healthcare is about. We tell them about who is a pharmacist, what is a pharmacist, and criteria and the features and the personal credentials of a pharmacist and the legal credentials of a pharmacist. Then we tell them a lot about medications for treatment of the pharmacotherapy, for example, pharmacology and so on. But to have more detailed information about the research and development, for example, when it comes to in its relationship with pharmaceutical industry and the market and the business part of it, that is, I think, that is some information which will be generated or gained later on in life. But they do know, and they should know, what is pharmaceutical industry and pharmaceutical companies do as one of the options, as a career option for pharmacists, as part of their curriculum. Mm-hmm. But the detailed information about what they may find or face there, it will probably become later in their lives, should they join pharmaceutical industry. You know, some of the schools which I took part in, undergraduate students are exposed to aspects of prescribing behaviors. I mean, what makes a prescriber prescribes, you know, or what makes a doctor, for example, prescribe certain brands or certain generics, and what is the effect of detailing or marketing strategies on the behavior of the prescriber, and what pressures that can put and how pharmaceutical industry exert those sort of marketing strategies which are known and permitted, but when it comes to ethics as well and codes of ethics, some of the students know about those aspects because they know what makes somebody prescribe certain medicines and what makes the other more reluctant to prescribe based on information given by a third party.
You know, you touched such an amazing and interesting topic when it goes about marketing strategies and how different pharmaceutical companies are using them. And let's discuss the ethical part of it. And this sort of, we have already started speaking about this pressure,
Yes.
which a pharmacist has from the side of pharmaceutical companies as well, about all those prescriptions and how they are making those how they are being pushed to be prescribed, or so, like sometimes it happens. What do you think if we look at this question from the side of pharmaceutical manufacturer, from the side of pharmaceutical distributor who is pushing the product into the market?
Yes.
Where is the ethical side of this aspect? What should be done? What should not be done? Where is this border between the business and society?
Yes, that's of course a very interesting question as well, and a very relevant area of concern and interest for a lot of stakeholders, whether governmental, whether the research, whether the pharmaceutical companies themselves, and industry, which is the line between profitability or profit-making generating and social responsibility. Now, some of the companies are really aware of that. They are really aware of their role in providing community services, of being responsible to the society, of being responsible towards the environment, towards education, towards well-being of communities, and they exhibit that in, or they do things that goes with those. And they do have a balance between profit generating and community responsibility or social responsibility. And this is very important. And that line become a little bit more murky with other companies and entities. This is well known, where profit generating far exceeds the interest of social responsibility in some of the companies. But we must, of course, agree first that there is a big role for pharmaceutical industry. They have done a lot of good in the history for humanity, for discovery of new medical entities and medications which are life-saving for people. So the industry, pharmaceutical industry, is very important. They do something very humane and very vital for the lives of the people on earth. That's definitely, and they've been doing that for long years. And for them to do that, they have to make profit. It's allowed, it is expected, and it is a duty for them to make profit so as they can actually pay back for the investment they have made in research and development. That's why some of the companies spend more than 20% of their revenue in marketing. More than 20% of their revenue in marketing, because they need to get back what they have been investing. And this is all good and expected, even to do marketing. Now, the problem comes in the application of marketing strategies, where sometimes it becomes a source of pressure on prescribers. And this is a fact. We're not telling a secret here, where pharmacists and doctors might be put under pressure of even feeling that you have a debt somebody treating you really nicely, giving you an incentive, giving you more samples, inviting you to a conference.
And sometimes it's so difficult to say no.
Yes, yeah. and sometimes you justify to yourself, hey, it's been so nice, and if I prescribe that medicine, the medicine is good anyway. It's passed all the, all the tests. It is already in the country, so why not? So here comes the murky issue and very disturbing issue of sometimes you, especially junior doctors.
Isn't it the deal with the devil?
Exactly. I mean, you have to be, extra careful. And that is based on research. The research has been conducted. We know now there are certain theories, like the theory of the agency. I mean, a doctor is considered an agent because pharmaceutical companies most of the time don't market with the consumer, except in a couple of countries. Direct-to-consumer advertising is allowed in the US and New Zealand, where they are allowed to advertise directly on TV.
Russia.
And
Russia for OTC products.
Okay, welcome to the club. But here is advertising not only for the OTC, others as well. That's why each ad finishes with, ask your doctor to prescribe this for you. Ask your doctor. So they directly approach the consumer. But in most of other cases, companies do not market to the consumer. They're not allowed to market to the consumer. So what do? They go through a third party or a middle, who's the prescriber.
Agent.
The agent. So the agency is the agency theory. So they know a lot of theories like diffusion and adoption, where they talk about their product, give all the convincing evidence until the idea is adopted by the prescriber. And they have found there are certain factors which influence or have impact on whether you will prescribe or not. For example, age has been found as a factor, where people older than 50 are more reluctant to prescribe, the product they've been advertised to. Younger people are much more adventurous. They want to try something new. Mm-hmm. They find males are much more easy to prescribe than females, and so on. So there is gender issues and so on. So these are theories where pharmaceutical companies use, and they know, and they train their marketing individuals to use these. Now the prescriber is put in a very vulnerable condition because they're not prepared to resist or to ask questions sometimes. So in some instances, prescribers do go with the flow and do prescribe. And this, unfortunately, as per research, a lot of medication errors happen because there is no indication for the product itself to be prescribed. So those pressures do result in outcome. The outcome is not necessarily always on the benefit of the patient. Hence, the importance of regulation, of codes of ethics, of adherence to codes of ethics. And the good side is a lot of companies adhere to these, and they have very strict rules. They don't interfere with things, and their marketing strategies is not too invasive, but others do cross the line, and prescribers do fall victims for that, and even in community pharmacies.
You are facing so many different companies, and I've heard the point of view that when it goes about marketing strategies of big pharma companies, they are super wealthy, and they can invest, and they can buy some molecules and work on the basics of innovation drugs, and where they can, of course, create the hugest margin when the product is still under the patent. And small and medium-sized companies, they cannot usually afford themselves to do that. They need to compete in the generic field, and that's why some sort of these ethical games goes on the table. And this is in parallel the question which we have already discussed about the ethics of the particular pharmacist, which you either ask this person to go to doctor, or you make a kind of prescription, like an average one, but to make good for your business. So there is also the question between the personal aspect of the business and if you can afford yourself to be at this ethical level or not, because you cannot feed your kids with just promises and with just
being nice.
Yeah, just with air. So, and when it goes about these sorts of thing and this relationship between big pharma and small and medium pharma companies, don't you think that this is creating the disbalance and this put the advantage for big pharma?
Yeah.
And this is so easy to be ethical when you're super rich already. But how then small and medium pharma can go up to this level?
You know, it's all about I think it's all about this, you know, the ethics and following ethics and adherence to it has to be a culture, has to be a habit, I think, from people who are stakeholders in this. I mean, we know that pharmaceutical companies who develop new medicines, they have the patency. And this is a big issue as well in ethics. They have the patency, that means nobody else can make this medicine until the patency expires. But there other companies, manufacturers, can make something similar but not the same. It's called me too drugs. Like I am almost like that, but and
almost is the main word in this sentence.
Yeah, maybe composition is even different because the patency, you know, protect. So here they're making money, they're making money all the time for about 20 years, or depending on how long they have purchased the patency for. When the patency expires, it comes to the era of the generics. Now the generics is the same product, same adverse effect, same effect and everything, except only the box is different, the color is different, the name is different. And regulations makes it, that playing field is a bit fair, regulations, if we keep to the regulations. Because in many countries, doctors in hospitals, for example, are governed by law to prescribe in generic name, not in the brand name, which means the pharmacists have got the freedom to dispense anything he has of that medicine under whatever name. So there is some sort of forcing people not to work with companies, like prescribing in the commercial name, prescribe in the scientific name. We will dispense what we have.
International non-patent name.
Exactly.
Yeah. But some countries, like for example, over here in UAE, the system has been focused on generics, and all the prescription goes through international non-patent names. Yes. And for example, in Qatar, as far as I know, just correct me if I'm wrong, they are focusing on more of original drugs. And means this is all about brands and all about this stuff.
It depends. I think all government public hospitals are in generic, except there's some exceptions where you are allowed to prescribe in the brand. There are certain medications, if the patient changed the brand, although it is the same medicine, that can have some negative effect. These are medications with what we call narrow therapeutic range, like digoxin and theophylline for asthma and some of the antiepileptics, where if a patient started in a certain brand, they have to continue in that brand. So the prescription has to be in the brand name. But the rest of the medicines, all generic, they have to be prescribed in generic name in all public hospitals. The difference where is in the community pharmacies, for example, there still might be in the brand, and even marketing the brand in the community, and a lot of times the pharmacists themselves say, oh, this is better because it's made in the UK. While there is one which is made locally, which is the same, but because it's much more cheaper, they want to go to the more expensive. So there is a move now, especially in the public sector, in the government sector, that all prescriptions have to be in generic. This is a very good move, okay, and it gives the control in the availability based on the licensure and based on medications approved, the list of approved medicines. Whatever we have, as long as it's in the same composition, so it doesn't matter which name, then it will be dispensed. And that is something that has to be encouraged, even among the society. There's a lot of learning, and awareness has to be on the level of the communities, the society, the people have to know that if a medicine is made locally, doesn't mean it is ineffective. If a medicine is cheaper, doesn't mean that it's cheap because it's bad quality. It's just because the company does not need to invest. They did not make an investment so as to reflect in the price. It is.
But still, the clearance of API also makes sense. And like if it's, I'm just putting some more cases on the table. If this is the original drug, which went through all the stages of clinical studies and is proven at all sorts, so a doctor can expect that it will behave, this medicine will have this certain effect on the human's body. But when it goes about generics, this goes about the source of APIs, where it was delivered from, the clearance of these APIs, and etc., etc. And they do not have this tones of background of clinical trials, right?
Yes.
So isn't it the game for medical insurance system and against the patient?
No, because if I understood you correctly, I mean, why you find in the original brand?
Sometimes original drugs, it's said that they are working much better rather than generics.
Well, this is, any medicine. For example, if a medicine was made by a pharmaceutical company B, they found the drug, they manufactured it, they had the patency, they called it whatever name, and that is the name which is now famous because it is the original brand. And then after the patency expired, a company in Saudi or in Berlin or wherever made the drug, and it's a generic.
But the source of APIs can be different.
No, that drug cannot be sold unless it is bioequivalent. So by definition, if you find the generic in a shelf in a pharmacy, immediately this drug has been found to be bioequivalent to the brand. There is no question about it, because the company which has made it as a generic does not have to run all over those tests. It's already been done for them. That's why the original company had the patency to have the money back. But the other company doesn't have to do all these tests. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. They already have all this data available. It has been proven. All what they do is to make it correctly, and they can test it in the government Ministry of Health here against the brand, and they find it equal. Otherwise, it will not be sold in the pharmacy. So by definition.
So you generally think that this system, the regulation system that was created, it plays for the patient, not for the insurance companies, not for...
No, it is for the patient. All these regulations, even regulations for the purchasing of medicines based, is based on strict, regulations and rules. So at the end of the day, the patients will not be, paying hefty prices. There are also a lot of medicines are being partly paid by the government if they are prescribed, or totally paid by the government and insurance companies. So any medicines, and that's an important point, by the way, because I see myself, my experience here, this issue of different looks for the same medicine, people don't understand it correctly, and that put much more unnecessary cost on people's pockets, because they still think the origin of the medicine, the country-wise, makes a difference, and it doesn't. A drug made in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in the United Arab Emirates, if it is by a local company here, it is equivalent to the original made in elsewhere, although it costs only half the price. People still under the impression that cheaper is worse and more expensive is better. And the problem, some pharmacists, for example, use that and say, yes, it is much more expensive, it's better. It's not. That's an issue of public awareness campaigns by pharmacists to the public.
And this is also about ethical aspect.
And this is about a big ethics question, definitely, yes.
one of the last questions of mine. Looking backwards about your experience and about all the story you came through, what do you regret about?
Oh, where did that come from? I don't think I regret any decisions I made. So far, apart from the COVID, which has changed a lot of things in life, definitely, because that's out of my control. But I think my movement through different countries allowed me a lot of opportunities to meet amazing, magnificent people. And I think when I look back, I was so lucky to be in the places I've told you about. I think my family was lucky also to be with me in all those places as well. I'm so fortunate to actually be able to do a work that I like and I love, and I think there is, and I always think there is a meaning to it, what I do, and this was one of the reasons why I came back to this region, which I like as well, where there is usually something that you do which makes sense, and that you see you are making, some difference in your students, and you are gaining as well experience by knowing people, and so I think that over sort of is much more than my regrets. It's actually
Proud of yours.
I'm fortunate and proud, and I'm happy of the choices that I made.
Try to imagine you have a time machine and you can go backwards to yourself being at the age of, I do not know, 15 years old. What would you say to yourself, facing yourself at that age?
Oh, so if me now at this age goes and found, this is very interesting, very interesting question. Brace yourself, Nadir. There are a lot of things coming to your life, like it's one of those things. Or yeah, there are plenty of things that I could have told myself. Maybe don't do this or do that, maybe. Yeah, but I would probably tell myself, oh,
I would say to myself, go ahead and afraid nothing.
Really?
Yeah, this is what
I would
say
probably tell myself that, hey, there are plenty of things coming your way. All right, be prepared. Nice things coming, challenging situations coming, but there is no boring moment in your life, Nadir, I can tell you that. So, yeah, I'll encourage myself to, just like you said, to go with confidence and make the best of your life. Maybe I would tell myself, do something in the aspect of sport, like, right, hold on tennis much more. Maybe you become a world champion someday.
Then you wouldn't be here meeting me and talking about all these topics, right?
Yeah, well, there will be millions there, who knows.
Yeah, and probably we would speak with you as an Olympic champion.
Exactly. Yeah, but that's a very interesting question, by the way. I remember to ask some people about, all right, if you go back to when you're 15 years old, what would you tell yourself? I think I'll be very interested to know what they would say. Some of them will be like you, like, just do what you have done. Some of them will be like, hey, brace yourself for change. It's a nice question.
Thank you. It was a great discussion with you today.
Thank you very much.
Super amazing.
Thank you so much. I'm very, very pleased. And yeah, thanks very much for the invitation again. It was amazing.
I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. Whom you want to see next on our channel? Feel free to leave your comment down below. Please remember to like and subscribe, and press the ring bell to see the latest updates. Thank you.